Tonight is my father's yahrzeit, so I want to dedicate this shir in his memory, and to dedicate also the zchut of our learning, that it should help to bring home the hostages and protect our soldiers, Am Yisrael, and all of the innocents, and bring a speedy end to this war.
Amen.
So let me share a screen. Share the screen. Okay. Let's get to where we're going. So wait, I didn't even listen to the whole shir from last time, but I remember now that I said in the shir that I would send you sheets. Did I send you any sheets?
Yeah, you sent the Pesukim, the verses.
Oh, okay. Good. At least that. Okay, I was a little worried that well, let me bring those psukim up because we're going to need them again today. Okay. Okay, I have them. They're not on the screen yet, but that's fine. Okay. So here's the thing. I also don't remember exactly where we got up to last time, but I think just a second. We didn't get that far. Anyway, I apologize. I'm a little bit out of it. I've been extremely exhausted, possibly from all of the travel. So just bear with me. So this sugya, again, started off with Reish Lakish's comment, question about why did the Torah not word the issue of Inui on Yom Kippur in the form of an azhara? And so we've learned a little bit about what that means, that there are four languages, there are four terms that are used for indicating an azhara, and that for every isur in the Torah, which the Torah also ascribes a punishment to, there's going to be a pasuk that describes the punishment, and a separate pasuk that's going to describe the isur. So the isur is going to be called the azhara, and the punishment is the punishment. So actually, I am going to switch over for a second to the psukim. So these are all the psukim with malacha and inui nefesh for Yom Kippur, beginning in Achrei Mot, where we have first in the same pasuk Inui and Melacha, Vayta lachem lechukat olam b'chodesh hashvi b'asor lechodesh tanu et nafshotechem b'chol melacha lo ta'asu. So this is phrased the way an azhara would be phrased, but it's the azhara is vis-a-vis the melacha, right? Because it says for Inui it says ta'anu et nafshotechem, which sounds like it's in a positive form. You have to afflict your souls. And then melacha lo ta'asu. It's a separate thing. So we have an azhara for the melacha. And then we skip to pasuk lamed aleph, repeats the idea of inui nefesh, v'initem et nafshotechem. And then we go over to Parshat Emor, and we have another pasuk of inui, v'initem et nafshotechem. And we have our second pasuk of Melacha, Chol Melacha lo tasu. And here it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, and this is going to be significant, this concept of Etzem Hayom. And the next pasuk is Inui Nefesh, V'ki Chol HaNefesh Asher Lo Tuneh Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh V'nichbata Me'ameh. So here we have the Onesh for not being mitaneh on Yom Kippur. And then the next pasuk we have the onesh for doing malacha, kol nefesh asher taseh kol malacha be'etzem hayom hazeh, v'avadati et hanefesh hahi mikerav hama. Then another pasuk of malacha lo tasu, so another azara, and then once again v'initem et nafshotechem, and here the significant part for our discussion is going to be where it says later, right, in the pasuk, "V'tisha lechodesh ba'erev me'erev ad erev." And then finally we have both of them mentioned again in Parshat Pinchas. So what we see is that there are 5 psukim that deal with malacha. 4 of them are in the form of azharot, and 1 of them is the onesh. Reish Lakish wants to know, why is it that the Torah didn't put inui nefesh in the form of an azhara? And so what was his answer?
He said it was. Oh,
Sorry, say it again.
oh I'm sorry. He said it was impossible. You couldn't formulate it.
Right. So he claims that you can't. There is no way to formulate it, and and fulfill the what we see as a requirement in terms of formulation, that it has to have one of 4 terms, either lo, al, hishamer, or pen. And then there's some discussion, and finally we get Rav Ashi, who says actually the Torah could have said al tasur min ha'inui, so then it would have this language of al, and by adding in this word tasur, to not turn away from inui, it should fulfill that basic concept. So the Gemara just leaves that as a kasha on Reish Lakish. But here I want to show you something. I have a bunch of I have too many windows open here, but just a second. I'll make room. Okay, so this is the Tosfos read. The read was Rabbi Yeshaya de Tromi. It's from Italy, 12th century. Rabbi Yeshaya Bereb Mali de Tromi, Nolad Be'erech Shnat Daled Aleph Taf Kuf Mem, around 1180, in the city of Troni in Italy. He was one of the great Rishonim of Italy. And his grandson is also Rabbi Yeshaya de Troni, but he's known as the Riaz. in case this ever comes up in your learning, which stands for Rabbi Yeshaya Achron, Zichrono Livracha. It was the later Rabbi Yeshaya. In the back of a standard Gemara, which now I know that Michael Werner has several volumes of, when you look at the Rif, you will see sometimes comments that from the Riaz. And sometimes the Riaz quotes his grandfather, the Reed. In any event, for a long time, a lot of the Reed's work had been lost, but much of it had been recovered, and he wrote quite comprehensively on different Masechtas of Shas. So I just wanted to show you what he says about this part with Reish Lakish. He says, Amar Reish Lakish mimnei ma lo nemra as harabi inui. So that's Reish Lakish's question. Kashali. So the Rit says, I find this difficult. Kevan de lo nemra as harabi inui elo mitzvah taseh tanu et nafshot. Inken lo yehe chayav chatat bishgaga. In other words, so if we take this to its logical conclusion, so there is no pasuk that, in fact, words inui nefesh as an azhara. It's only always worded as a positive commandment, anu et nafshotechem. So if that's true, then he shouldn't be chayav v'chatat bishgaga. If he's shogeg and he's not mitaneh, then because the Torah didn't formulate this as an isur, so he shouldn't be chayav b'chatat if he violates it. K'dinan b'perakama dekritot. We're in the first parak of kritot. Shepesach b'milah ibnei shehen mitzvot aseh she'en bahem chatat. When the Mishnah, the very first Mishnah in Kritot, lists all of the Chayavei Kritot. So it lists Pesach and Mila, right? So if you don't do the if you were in a position to do the Korban Pesach, if you didn't do the Korban Pesach, or if you didn't do a Brit Milah, then you're Chayav Karet, but you're not Chayav Chatat, because they're mitzvot aseh, because they're positive commandments. Therefore, ein behem chatat. V'afal pi sheyesh ben karet l'gabei chatat ba'inen lav the karet. In order to be chayav a chatat, you have to have a lav, you have to have an isur from the Torah, and also the punishment of karet. So he says very kind of interestingly and kind of plainly, v'yesh lomar t'vadai pshitale reish lakish v'hai Tanu azhara shelo yochal v'yishtehu. Says, really, I could understand this a little differently. That actually Reish Lakish understands the wording as is of Tanu nafshotechem to be an azhara, even though it's worded in this positive way. It's really a way of in this particular way, in this particular instance, it's the Torah telling me an isur that you're not allowed to eat and drink. And I would say it's not like Pesach and Mila. Sheyesh ben ma'aseh biyadayim. There's a distinction between not doing the Korban Pesach and not doing a Mila, where there's an actual positive commandment to do something, which you should do a Pesach, you should do a Mila biyadayim, meaning physically you have to do those things. But this, in other words, inui nefesh, ein lo ma'aseh, there's no action involved. Ela k'sheino ochel v'shoteh. Rather, what does it mean that when one does not eat or drink, nimtza shehu mitaneh? It's only by inaction that we determine that somebody fulfilled the commandment of being mitana hilkach. Therefore, hai ta'anu azhara shelo yilcha v'yishtehu. So therefore, I could say that when the Torah says ta'anu, that itself is an azhara that one should not eat or drink. So if that's all true, so why does Reish Lakish ask his question? So the reader is saying Reish Lakish really accepts this idea that Ta'anu et nafshotechem on Yom Kippur is an exceptional case in terms of its formulation, and it does imply by itself an azhara, and it's not comparable to Pesach and Milah, which do not have azharot, because there you're supposed to do something. And here, the inui nefesh is, even though it's worded as a positive, is really a negative, right? The fact is that it means that you're not supposed to eat or drink. So I could take it to mean to apply an azhara. So why does Reish Lakish ask his question? Elahai kashali. Amai lo apik la'azhara zu b'lashon lav ela b'lashon zeh. So Reish Lakish's question is really just, why didn't the Torah phrase this in the negative? Why did it choose to phrase it in the positive? And his answer is just, that there was no way to do that. But he accepts the idea that it's an azhara. So this is important from halachically, because otherwise you would have this question. If Reish Lakish is correct, then one should not be chayav chatat if they ate or drank b'shogeg on Yom Kippur. So this is comment by the read, which I think is very sort of direct to the point, worth pointing out. So what happened? So we saw, okay, so we saw that part. Then we did the next part, where Gemara began, Tana Maiti La Mehacha. The Tana brings it from here. So we looked at the Sifra, at the Torat Kohanim, where this drasha is taken from. When we looked at the Torat Kohanim, I showed you a little bit more than what the Gemara shows here. The little bit more was the sort of the preamble to this, which introduced the idea of adding on, of Tosefet Kodesh, that you're going to add on both to the beginning of Yom Kippur and the end of Yom Kippur, both regarding Melacha and Inui Nefesh, so that you're supposed to start fasting even a little bit before Yom Kippur and finish fasting a little bit after. And the same thing, that if you do Melacha even a little bit before Yom Kippur, a little bit after Yom Kippur, that's also forbidden. But then we have this part of the drasha, which is brought here because what does it mean? Tana Maiti La Mehacha. The Tana learns out the idea that there's an azhara associated with Inui Nefesh based on the following. So it behooves us to read through this again. So what does the Tana say? Initem es nafsha sechem b'chol melacha lo sasu. Yahu yehe anush karet o tosefet melacha. So it could be that one would be punished with karet for tosefet melacha. So what's tosefet melacha?
If one was to do malacha during that Tosefet, that period before and after the Chag.
Excellent. Right. So it's a funny kind of phrasing, but that's what it means. In other words, that one could be punished for doing melacha during this Tosefet, that's either the beginning of or the end of Yom Kippur. So when the Tana says Yahu Yehek Anush Karet Al Tosefet Melacha, based on this pasuk, or it says V'nitem et nafshotecher b'chol melacha lo tasu. Why would I think that one would be Anush Karet based on this pasuk for Tosefet Melacha? You see what I'm saying? He quotes this pasuk and he says, based on what he's saying essentially is based on this pasuk, I might think that one would be chayav karet for doing melacha during this time of Tosefet. So what's in this pasuk that would indicate that?
Maybe coal.
Maybe. Let's look at the pasuk again. I mentioned actually that there are different girsaot in which pasuk is quoted, but basically it's a little bit, in a sense, it's a little simpler, and this is why I showed you the previous parts of the Sifra, because it's the first part, which I just mentioned, is where the idea of Tosefet is learned out. So the idea really is once, just a second. Sorry, I have to keep trying. Right, so in this Girsa, he's quoting from Parshat Pinchas. It's in a sense it's simpler because it's not really from it's not a diuk in this pasuk per se. It's really a diuk in the idea that once I've established that there is such a thing as Tosefet Melacha, then when the Torah says "V'nitem et nafshotechem kol melacha lo tasu," then I would think that would be for Yom Kippur plus its Tosefet. In other words, the idea of Tosefet was established already. So then once there's an Isur that's associated with that Chag, in this case Yom Kippur, then my assumption is going to be that I'll be chayav for the Tosefet, because now I'm going to say that the Tosefet is part and parcel of the Chag, or of the Moed, which is Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, so the Brisa says, Talmud Lamar b'chol hanefesh asher taseh kol melacha be'etzem hayom hazeh ve'avadati et hanefesh shehi mikerav hama. So what's the drasha? Al itzumo shel yom anush karei. So, and what, in other words, so it goes like this. Once I've established there's an idea of Tosefet, then my assumption would be that the Tosefet is just like the Ikar part of the day, the main part of the day, the 24-hour part of the day. And I'm going to add a little bit before and a little bit after. But now it should have the same din. But the Torah actually has another pasuk that tells me differently, because this pasuk says, so you're only going to be chayav for doing melacha be'etzem hayom. So etzem hayom is going to imply that ikar part of the day, or what the Gemara here calls itzumo shel yom, al itzumo shel yom anush karet. Ve'ino anush karet al tosefet melacha. So once the Torah says etzem hayom hazeh, then I'll say, okay, that excludes melacha, not from the isur. There's still an isur, but one will not be chayav karet, because you can only be chayav karet for doing melacha be'etzem hayom. So then I'll say, yachol lo yehei anush karet al tosefet melacha. Okay, so granted, you've shown me that I'm not chayav karet for doing malacha during this Tosefet. But I should be chayav karet for not being mitaneh during the Tosefet time, before and after. Talmud Lomar, ki kol hanefesh asher lo tuneh be'etzem hayom hazeh v'nichrata me'ameh. Right. So this we also saw. There's another etzem hayom that's associated with inui. So you're only going to be chayav karet for violating inui nefesh be'etzem hayom and not on the tosefet. Al yitzumo shel yom anush karet, ve'ino anush karet al tosefet inu. Okay, so far so good. So what we've established is there is this idea that there's Yom Kippur that's 24 hours, and that the Torah also mandates that there's a Tosefet before and after that extends Yom Kippur. And so then I think, to what purpose is it going to extend Yom Kippur? So it's going to extend it for Inui and for Malacha. So now I've just gone through an exercise to show that it's not extended to the extent that one will be chayav karet for either Malacha or Inui Nefesh during this Tosefet. Okay, but so I still want to know then, so for what purposes do I have the Tosefet? Yachol lo yehe bichlal onesh, aval yehe muzhar al Tosefet Malacha. Okay, so it could be, which is how we've concluded until now, that one will not be included in the category of getting a punishment for doing Tosefet, right, for Malacha Tosefet, but you'll be muzhar from doing Malacha. So what does it mean that you're muzhar?
Warned.
Warned, and in our very specific halachic context, what does muzhar mean? What is an azara?
Expression of a prohibition.
It's an expression of a prohibition, that there's an isur lav. So, granted, you won't be chayav karet if you do malacha during this tosefet, but there's an azhara. I should assume that there's an azhara not to do malacha during that time. So, what would it mean at that moment? What would it mean that you're not? The Torah would prohibit you from doing malacha. But if you did malacha, you would not be chayav karet. Not every isur Torah brings about a punishment. Certainly not everyone brings about a punishment of karet. But nonetheless, I could assume that the Torah is telling me you're not allowed to do malacha, even though you won't be chayav karet if you do. But Talmud Lomar b'chol malacha lo ta'asu be'etzem hayom hazeh. Right. So this was the other pasuk of Etzem Hayom for Malacha. 1 second, I have to make sure you're seeing. Do you see the psukim? No. Now you should see the psukim. Right, so we just read through these, but just again, we have a lot of moving parts just to keep it in our mind. So the first pasuk of Etzem Hayom, that the Gemara, that the Braita quoted, was actually the second pasuk, that as it comes in Amor. It says, "V'chol nefesh asher ta'aseh kol malacha be'etzem hayom hazeh, v'havarati et hanefesh hahi mikerav hama." So from that pasuk, we learned that you're only chayav karet for doing malacha be'etzem hayom. And then now we just said, okay, so you're only chayav karet for doing malacha be'etzem hayom, but maybe it's still asur to do malacha when it's not be'etzem hayom in the Tosefet. So then we go to this pasuk where it says v'chol malacha lo ta'asu be'etzem hayom hazeh. So the azhara of malacha itself only applies to etzem hayom and not to the Tosefet. So now we've excluded the isur malacha. In other words, now there is no isur malacha or onesh of melacha for this time of Tosefet. Right? Yachol lo yehe bichlal onesh, aval yehe muzhar. And as Rashi says, yehe muzhar belav, that you will be muzhar with an isur love on Tosefet melacha. Talmud lomar b'chol melacha lo tasu be'etzem yamazal itzumo shel yom hu muzhar ve'ino muzhar Tosefet melacha. Okay. Yachol lo yehe muzhar Tosefet melacha. So now we'll say, we'll go through the same process that we did with Tosefet Inui, where we excluded it from Karet, but maybe Tosefet Inui is still going to be Asur, Vidinhu. So here, see, I don't have a second pasuk about Inui Nefesh that just gives me, as it were, an Isur Lav by Inui Nefesh. If you follow what I'm saying. In other words, I have two psukim of Etzem Hayom for Malacha. So one is for the Onesh, and one's for the Azhara, for the Lav. I only have one pasuk of Etzem Hayom for Inui. And I already said in the earlier part now in the Branta, that tells me that I won't be chayav for violating Inui Nefesh. I won't be chayav an onesh. I won't be chayav karet for Tosefet Inui, right? For doing Inui during this time of Tosefet. But what about the Isur? So again, we're going on the assumption that Inui is actually an Isur Lav. It's an Isur Lav. So maybe now, since I don't have a second Be'etzem Hayom for Inui, maybe that tells me that the Torah is Mazhira, that there is an Isur Lav of Inui during this time of Tosefet. So there isn't an Isur Lav of Malacha, and there isn't an Onesh Karet for Malacha, and there isn't an Onesh Karet for Inui, but maybe there's an Isur Lav for Inui, for Tosefet. That's what the Gemara is up to, and so it says, so now it makes a Kal V'chomer. Dinhu. So din in this context implies that I'm going to learn out by Kal V'chomer. I'm going to make the following logical argument. Uma melacha shenoheget b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim. So, just as I say regarding melacha, which is practiced on Shabbos and Yom Tov. In other words, the idea that there's an Isur Melacha is practiced on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and nonetheless, no muzhar aleha, and nonetheless, one is not muzhar. There isn't an Isur Azhara of Melacha. When isn't there an Isur Azhara of Malacha?
Shabbat and Yom Tov.
No, we just said that there is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Yom Kippur. Or for Tosefet. Yom Kippur.
You got it.
Third guess.
Right.
So no, it wasn't even a guess. I just wasn't.
No, I understand. No, but that's exactly right. In other words, so what we're going to say is there's a chumrah associated with Isur Melacha. So we say Ma Melacha shenoheget b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim. So it's chamur in that there's an Isur Melacha that's noheget on all Shabbos and all other holidays. And nonetheless, no muzhar aleh. And afal pichein, even though it has this chumrah, there isn't an Isur Melacha in the Tosefet of Yom Kippur. So let's compare that to Inui. Inui, sheino noheg b'Shabbatot v'yamim tovim. So Inui, which is not practiced on Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's only practiced on Yom Kippur. So it's kal vis-a-vis melacha, right? Eino din shelo yehe musar alav. So does it not therefore make sense to say that there would also be no azhara, there would be no love of Tosefet Inui, right? So even if there isn't a love of Tosefet Melacha on Yom Kippur, then Kol Shekain, there should not be an Isur love of the Tosefet Inui, because Inui is more kal. It's only Noheg on Yom Kippur. Okay? So far so good. So what is it? So let's say that's true. Let's say that for this at this moment that's true. So then what are we left with? What halacha or what halachot have we now derived from this discussion regarding Tosefet Malacha and Tosefet Inui?
First, there's no punishment for Tosefet Malacha or Tosefet Inui.
Right. And second,
that there's no azahara for Tosefet Malacha, and then we learn from the Kal Vachomer that that's also the case for Tosefet Inui.
very good. So at this moment, that's what we're left with. So all we know is that regarding both Malacha and Inui, that one is Chayav Karet, that there's an Isur Lav, and is Chayav Karet Be'etzem Hayom, but there is no Isur Karet and no Azharat Lav in the Tosefet of Yom Kippur. So that's all well and good, but what was our original question?
Why is there no azara for Inui Nefesh on Yom Kippur?
Right, and so I still don't have that. And that's what the Braita says. Al azhara inui shel yom atzmo lo lamadnu minayin. But I still have not learned the azhara for inui of the day itself. I still don't know where I get that from. Now, I just want to make a little sidebar here. When I was first reading this Gemara, I wasn't sure where to put the minayin. In other words, there are different ways of breaking up this sentence. I'll just put it that way, because I could say, lo lamadnu, period. We didn't learn it. And then I could say minayin is separate. Minayin. So where do I know it from? There's not a big difference between those two readings. But I saw in some readings, I think they put minayin as the introduction to the next part. The reason I put it here, I'll just tell you, I don't have an Art Scroll Gemara, and but I was at somebody's house for Shabbos that had it, so I was just looking to see, out of curiosity, the way they learned this sugya, and I think they put it. This is not necessarily. It's not saying it's wrong, but they put it at the beginning. The reason I put it here is because that's the nusach in the Sifra. This is the way the Sifra reads. It has minayin, which would seem to be at the end of the sentence. All right, that's just a little sidebar. It doesn't change the meaning of the sugya that much. Okay, so that's what we're up to. And I think mostly what we did now is a review of like the last part of the last year, but it was 2 weeks ago. It's a lot to keep in mind, so it was worth doing. And I believe it was Paul. By the way, Paul already told me he would be able to come to see me, in case you're wondering. I think Paul at that time raised the question. So if it's not if there's no onesh and it's not asur, so then what's the point of the Tosefet? So what would be the point? So what did I answer?
It's a getter.
That's not what I said, but what do you mean?
Okay, maybe this. Okay, actually I was taking a guess, which is not really fair.
No, but okay, what's your guess? What do you mean that it's a
Meaning it's adding a little bit on, adding a little bit on before and after, so that it says that one does not inadvertently violate the Isur Be'etzem Hayom.
Okay, so you might say that maybe the Torah itself has instituted a siag l'Torah, a geder. So even though so you know what, even if I say that, I would still say what I said last time, which is apparently, and this doesn't contradict what you're saying, Michael, but I would put it a little differently. That apparently the Tosefet now I would understand is not there mishum isur, mishum onesh. It's there as it were like a kind of mitzvah say. In other words, that one should refrain from doing melacha, and one should be mitaneh during that time, in order to be mosif kodesh al chol, in order to add kedusha onto the profanity of the day before and after. I believe we glanced quickly at the sugya in Rosh Hashanah, where the question of Tosefet Kodesh al Chol was the subject of a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Akiva learns it out from a pasuk of the Harish V'Katzir Tishbot, which ostensibly is talking about uh, Shabbat, or it's ostensibly talking about Shvi'it, about Shemitah, but he says really it must be talking about Shabbat, and then he derives from that because of sort of extraneousness of that verse, that there's Tosefet Kodesh al Chol for all Moadim. And Rabbi Yishmael disagrees with him, and he learns it out actually from here, and which of course fits into the fact that the Torah Kohanim is attributed largely to Rabbi Yishmael. This is from the Torah Kohanim. So it's a kind of mitzvah aseh. It's a kind of an aseh that we add on from Kodesh to Chol. There's a kind of, I think we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the next Amud, because that's where the Gemara itself is going to bring this drasha of Me'era Bader to learn out that there's Tosefet Kodesh al Chol. The way the Gemara introduced the Braita here, it introduces it picks up the Braita from the point where the Braita in the Sifra already has a notion of Tosefet Kodesh al Chol, but the Gemara itself has not given me the source for the Tosefet of Kodesh al Chol. That's why I showed you the Machloket Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, in any event, so at this point, we don't know, and we want to know. We still want to know where is there an azhara from the Torah for inui nefesh on Yom Kippur. So now we get to the next part. It says lo yomar onesh b'melacha degamar me inui. Okay, so now we're going to take a different tack, and we're going to say, look. So literally, what does this mean? Don't say, or it should not be said, that there's an onesh for doing melacha, because I learned it from Inui. But what the Gemara means is, the Torah didn't have to give me a special pasuk to tell me that there's an onesh for doing melacha on Yom Kippur. Why not? Because I could have learned it from Inui. How would I have learned that there's an onesh for malacha from Inui? So the Gemara says, "Ma Inui." This is actually still part of the Brayta. Ma Inui sheino noheg b'Shabbatot v'yamim tovim anush karet. Ha shenoheget b'Shabbatot v'yamim tovim lo kol shekain. So I could say, look, the Torah just would have had, if the Torah had just told me that there's an onesh karet for Inui, then I would have said, and so wait, remember, what are we saying? We're acknowledging that the Torah gives us an Isur love of Malacha on Yom Kippur. And now I'm going to say, okay, I could have just said the love, and it didn't have to tell me that there's an Onesh, because I could learn out from Inui. How would I learn out from Inui? So again, I have this idea that Inui vis-a-vis Malacha is Kal. Why is it Kal?
We only do a nui on Yom Kippur, whereas, yeah, we only do a nui on Yom Kippur, whereas Malacha is a surah not only in Yom Kippur, but also Shabbatot and Yom Yomim Tovim.
Very good. So I could say, I could say, look, there's a pasuk that tells me that anybody who's not nitaneh on Yom Kippur is chayav karet. And so what would I have? I would have a pasuk that says Kol melacha lo tasu, and I would have a pasuk that says that tanu et nafshotechem on Yom Kippur, and I have another pasuk that says that anybody who's not mitaneh on Yom Kippur is chayav karet. So if I had just those three psukim, then I could learn out both. I could learn out that malacha is both asur and it's chayav karet, because I'd say if inui nefesh is chayav karet on Yom Kippur and it's kal, it's only noheg on Yom Kippur, then malacha shenoheget b'Shabbatot v'yamim tovim lo kol shekain. Would it all the more so? Would it not be all the more so that I'd be chayav karet for doing malacha on Yom Kippur? Because after all, malacha already has a chumrah that it's noheg on all Shabbatot and Yamim Tovim. And so, what would it mean? I don't need the Torah to tell me. I don't need now a specific pasuk to tell me that malacha is chayav karet, because I could have learned it out from the Kal V'chomer, from Inui. So if that's true, lama ne'amar. So why, in fact, did the Torah give me this pasuk that says that anybody who does malacha ba'avadati et nefesh ahi? Why does it give me an onesh by malacha? So now we'll introduce this idea, mufneh lahakish v'ladon mimenu gzeira shava. So now, why is it there? It's there to be mufneh. Mufneh means it's open. In other words, I don't need this pasuk to tell me what it literally tells me. It's superb because the pasuk now is superfluous for its own purposes. So it means it's mufneh. Now it's open to learn something else from. Mufneh, so I'll say it's mufneh lahakish v'ladon mimenu gzeira shava. Now I can say that it's open in order to be makish, in order to make a connection to another halacha, and to learn from it a gzeira shava. So what would the gzeira shava be? Ne'amar onesh bi'inui, v'ne'amar onesh b'mlacha. So I have a pasuk of onesh for inui, and I have a pasuk of onesh for melacha. So what will I learn out? Ma melacha lo anash ela im kain, he's here. Just as melacha, the Torah does not mete out punishment unless it is given an azhara, right? Or it's until an azhara has been expressed. Af inui lo anash el im kain, he's here. So then I'll say it must be true also that the Torah did not ascribe a punishment to inui without there first being an azhara. So let's stop there and consider what the Gemara is saying. So if that's true, first of all, what question have I now answered?
It's the
believe-
source.
Michael Schwartz.
It's the source. It's Resh Lachi's question. It's the source of the Asara for Inui Nefesh on Yom Kippur.
Yeah. So in other words, so now at this point, if I were to stop here, then I'd say this is the way the this Tana of the Sifra, this is the way he answered Reish Lakish's question. So, or at least it's a by way of Reish Lakish's question. In other words, so the Torah doesn't have a language of Azhara. Why not? Because I can learn the Azhara out by this Gzeira Shava. I'm going to learn it out by deriving from what I know about Malacha and the relationship between Malacha and Inui, and that's how I'm going to say it. So let's just okay. So let's consider this again. Let's just go over it again. So what we said is, how do we get here? We got here by saying that the Torah did not have to give me a specific pasuk of onesh for malacha, because I could have learned out the onesh malacha by kal v'chomer from Inui. So in that the Torah did give me a pasuk of onesh for malacha, so it must be there to teach me something else, something other than onesh for malacha. So what it teaches me is that just like the Torah doesn't ascribe onesh for malacha without having also given an azhara, then I will say that because of the relationship between malacha to inui, that inui must be the same. That the fact that the Torah Dafka gave a pasuk of onesh to inui, the Torah must assume that I know that there's an azhara for inui, and so therefore it didn't need to be written. The azhara didn't need to be written. I get it because I'm going to learn it out in this way from Malacha. So it's a little tricky, but that's what the Braita here wants to say. However, now the Gemara says, look, Ika lemifrach. I could challenge that. I could break that. I could ask a kashan. I could break it down. Because what would I say? Mali inui shalohu tar michlalo. Tomar b'mlacha shutra michlala. I could say, what about inui, which has no exception to its general rule? It has no heter to its general rules. So there's a concept that's brought up here and several other places in Shas, that certain mitzvot, lotas say, are not absolute, that there are exceptions to them. So, for example, the Torah says, lo taharog, right? You're not allowed to kill. But that mitzvah is hutra michlava, because there's such a thing as capital punishment. In other words, sometimes there are exceptions to killing. So it's not an absolute, lo taharog is not an absolute closed mitzvah that you're never allowed to kill. It means that generally you're not allowed to kill, but there are going to be exceptions. So the same thing is going to be true of malacha, but will not be true of inui nefesh. In other words, mali inui shalohu tamichlalo. In other words, whenever the Torah said that you have to be mitaneh, that was absolute. There are no exceptions to that. And it only said it once, and only said it by Yom Kippurim, but the point is, there are no exceptions. Whereas malacha is hutra michlala. When is malacha hutra michlala? What's the exception for doing malacha on Yom Kippur or Shabbat or Yom Tov?
Pikuach nefesh.
No. But I'm glad you said it because I thought you might.
I'm
No,
not
no.
sure if I should be. I'm not. I don't know if I should be glad that I'm so predictable or not.
Well, I thought one of you might say it, so it wasn't you in particular. But
I was going to say that also.
see, you might think that, but that's not the idea of hutra michlala is not that. Pikuach nefesh is a principle that overrides any sur. It doesn't. It's not inherent to that particular isur. In other words, there's an isur melacha, but anytime I have to save somebody's life, it's going to override any isur that might prevent me from doing that. So in the case, but what does it? What do I mean when I say hutra michlala? What I mean is, like I said, that's why I gave the example of lo taharog. So lo taharog, all right, you could also say there's an exception to of lo taharog, that if it's to save your own life or to save somebody else's life, you can kill somebody. But I didn't use that example. What's the example I used?
Capital punishment.
Capital punishment. In other words, it means that, as it were, written into the statutes of that you're not allowed to kill is but there are exceptions to that particular isur. So there's an exception to lo ta'arog of capital punishment. So if I talk about malacha, where does the Torah tell me explicitly that even though you're not allowed to do malacha, let's say on Shabbat, but here you have to do malacha?
Oh, the korbanot.
Very good. You still have to do the avodah, the Beit HaMikdash. You still have to do korbanot. You still have to do shlita. You still have to do burning. Those are things that the Torah mandates that you must do. Right? So it means that the isur of malacha is hutra michlala. There's an exception to its general rule that's part and parcel of the rule. So now, this will be a difference between inui nefesh and malacha. Inui nefesh, there is no heter. Now, and here, this is where you see what I mean about pikuach nefesh, because of course we know if somebody's going to die, if they're mitaneh, of course we save their lives. Of course we feed them, or of course we give them treatment. But inui nefesh per se has no heter. There's no inbuilt heter for any exception. There's no exception to that rule. Whereas malacha, there are built-in exceptions. So how is that relevant to our case? So just a moment ago, we wanted to say, I can learn out that there's an azhara for inui nefesh by virtue of the fact that there's an azhara for malacha. The azhara for melacha is mifurash. The Torah says explicitly, kol melacha lo ta'asu. And the Torah also tells me that anybody who does melacha is chayav karet, v'avarati et nefesh. And so I wanted to say, I can learn out, since I don't need the pasuk of onesh for melacha, because I could have learned it out from inui. So the pasuk of onesh then becomes superfluous. So I'm going to use it as a basis to learn back something about inui. And what will I learn out? I'll learn out that just like the Torah went out of its way to give me both an azhara and express the onesh from melacha, and I see by inui that expressed the onesh, so I'll say just like melacha, the Torah didn't give an onesh without azhara. So by inui, the Torah wouldn't have given an onesh unless there was an azhara. So it doesn't mean that now I have a pasuk that tells me an azhara, but I derive logically that there must be an inbuilt azhara. And then the Gemara says, no, I can ask a kasha on that limud, because I'll say, Mali inui shelo hutar michlalo, tomar b'mlacha shu hutar michlala. So what's the kasha? Let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, Mali inui, klomar, onesh de melacha lav mufnehu. In other words, my kasha is going to be that I'm going to refute your contention that the onesh of melacha, that pasuk of onesh by melacha is superfluous, and therefore it's mufne. I'll say, no, it's not mufne. I still need it for melacha itself. Why? Shimbatil lamdo me'inui, because if I were to try to learn the onesh of melacha from inui, which is what we claimed that we could do, yesh lahashiv, I could reply to that. In other words, I could refute it by saying, melacha hutra miktzatza etzel gavoa. Melacha is partly made permissible, right? That's the exception. There are exceptions to melacha by gavoa, by that which is on high, meaning the korbanot. So what does it mean? I'll say, a moment ago I wanted to say I can learn the onesh of melacha from inui, but I'll say I can't learn it out from inui, because inui is chamur. Inui has a chumrah that melacha doesn't have. And so I might say that why did the Torah ascribe punishment to inui? Because it's not hutra michlalo. It doesn't, there are no exceptions to inui. And that's why the Torah gave it an onesh. And I would not be able to derive from that to learn an onesh from melacha. I'll say maybe the reason, or it's, if the Torah hadn't given me a pasuk of onesh by melacha, I would say maybe there is no onesh by melacha, because melacha is hutra michlala. Okay, it's a lot to take in, but where it leaves us is, once again, I no longer have an azhara for inui on Yom Kippur. That's where it leaves us, because a moment ago, until we got to the Ikan Lamifrach, our conclusion was, oh, I will learn out the azhara of inui from melacha. And how am I going to do that? Because I'll say that there's an extra pasuk by melacha of onesh. I didn't need that pasuk, so it must be there to tell me something not specifically about Onesh for Malacha, because I didn't need the pasuk for that. It's going to tell me something about the nature of the way Onesh works. That just like the Torah wouldn't give an Onesh without first giving an Azhara for Malacha, that must also be true by Inui. And then we say, but the whole thing falls apart because you're assuming that the pasuk of Onesh by Melacha is mufneh because it's superfluous. But I'll tell you it's not superfluous because I couldn't have learned out Melacha, the Onesh of Melacha, from the Onesh of Inui. Because Inui is not Hutar Michlalo, and Melacha is Hutar Michlala, it's Kal. I can't learn out a kal from a chomer. I can learn out a chomer from a kal, but not the other way. So we're back to where we started. We still don't have the azhara for inui. So we're going to go through. I know, Michael, you have to leave in 5 minutes. I'm going to read through the next part, and then we'll stop. Ella. Basically, we're going to take the argument that we just went through and we're going to switch it around, as you will see. Ela lo yomar onesh bi'inui. Why don't I go the other way and say, maybe the Torah didn't have to give me a pasuk of onesh for inui to gemar mi malacha, because I could have learned the onesh of inui from malacha. And I would say as follows. Ma malacha shehutra michlala anushkaret. Now I can take the logic and flip it around. I'll say, oh, if malacha that's hutra michlala, in other words, it has a kula, and nonetheless the Torah gives it an onesh kare, inui shelo hutar michlalo lo kol shekain, then all the more so I should give an onesh of karet to somebody who violates inui. So lama ne'amar. So therefore, why do I need the pasuk of onesh by inui? So then I'll say mufne. So now I'll say the pasuk of onesh by inui. That's what's mufne. That's what's superfluous, and it's mufne lahakish v'ladog mimena gzeira shava. I can learn a gzeira shava. Nemar onesh b'inui, v'nemar onesh b'mlacha. Ma melacha anash v'his here. So if I'll say that there's an onesh that the Torah gives us a pasuk of onesh of inui and also malacha, and now I'll say there's a hekesh, there's a relationship between them, gzeira shava, that's going to tell me, just like by malacha, the Torah punished and was mazhir, it gave us both an onesh and an azhara. Afinui anash v'hisir. I could say that there's an implied azhara by inui, just like there is an explicit azhara by melacha. But of course, the Gemara then says ikal mifrach. I can break that down, because this we should see it coming, because I know from elsewhere ma melacha shekain noheged b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim tomar b'inui she'no noheg b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim. In other words, I know from the earlier argument that melacha has a tzad chumrah, and inui has a tzad kula. And so since melacha has this tzad chumrah, I will say that the reason the Torah gave onesh to melacha is because of the tzad chumrah. And therefore, I don't know that it would have given an onesh to inui, because it doesn't have the tzad chumrah. So at that point, and we're going to go over this again next time, and I'll make a note so I don't forget. At that point, the Gemara still doesn't have the answer to its question. And so then we'll see what Ravina says. That'll be the next part. Ravina learns a little different. But Zell, Adkan. Okay, Michael, you can go. You have 2 minutes. I'm letting you out 2 minutes early. And Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you all next week.
Next week, Shavuot.
And not next week. So
Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
1 second, let me look at the, because I have a ticket to come back. I am coming back on the 25th, which I don't think will affect anything because it's a Tuesday. Okay, so we won't learn in Shavuot, but you should all learn on Shavuot. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks, and then after that should be smooth sailing. Okay,
Bye bye.
All
thanks.
right. Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.